What's going on, guys? Happy Friday. You guys know what that means. College football free bet Friday. Running hot on these bad boys. 6-2 on the season on these. And last Friday, I left you guys off with the Tennessee Vols -3. 5-unit banger. If you guys tailed that bet, appreciate you. If you guys tuned in last week, drop a comment below. And let's have another big Friday today. I also gave you guys Notre Dame in that last weekend's card. Now 7-1 run my last 8 college bets, hoping we can carry that over on into this week here coming up. Gonna have another bet for you guys going on tomorrow's slate, and we're gonna get into some of these big games going on over the weekend, big conference matchups, some revenge angles. Nothing for me on the Friday slate, just this SMU Temple game conference I really don't keep up with. So let's just go ahead and start diving into some of these Saturday games. We can start off with the first game on the card, the big matchup of the weekend, game of the weekend. My free bet's going to come in the SEC, by the way, guys. We'll get into that. But first off, let's talk about this Penn State, Ohio State matchup. Nittany Lions versus the Buckeyes. This is just going to be game of the week, right? 7 versus 3 here. This line opened up closer to 6.5, down about 4.5 now. That's really where it's been sitting most of the week is 4.5. This Buckeyes team looking pretty good, as they usually do. Penn State looking better than usual. 6-0 straight up and against the spread. They're covering numbers, so really tough to go against a team 6-0 straight up and against the spread. But I will say where it makes it interesting in this matchup is just the absolute ownership here with Ohio State. They have now won 10 of the last 11 meetings. They won last year's meeting 44 to 31, and that was a road game there. And really, if you look at the last, the little win streak they've had here, only the last meeting, the last 5, they all covered these numbers. So it's really been Ohio State matchup, really some dominance. If you get back into 2017, 2018, some one-score games, and prior to that, you had the Penn State win. But like I said, 10 of the last 11 meetings, Ohio State has won. I will say this is the best Penn State has looked since those, mid, 2017, 15, 16, where you're going to go back to. So take it with a grain of salt. One thing I will say is everyone keeps talking shit on McCord. Ohio State doesn't have as good of a passing game. The quarterback, blah, 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 blah. They're still top 20 in passing offense, and they bring a much better defense this go-around. And obviously Penn State, as far as defense, they might have the best defense in the country. First, as far as total yards allowed, as far as points allowed, holding teams to 8 points per game. Ohio State is 9.7 points per game. So, obviously Penn State typically a bit more of a defensive juggernaut. Still are. Ohio State, offensive juggernaut. Still are, but a lot better defensively. Penn State, a lot better offensively. So these teams, based off of, tendencies and what we've seen in previous seasons, just a bit different here. I like what we've seen with the Lard. Don't love it, but obviously the ground game's still there, very potent for Penn State. And I don't have a bet on the side in this game. I'm going to say that. My lean would simply be to Penn State, just getting a team 6-0 against the spread, getting points with them. Obviously, if you got an early number on this and that's closed down, good on you, getting some closing line value. It's really the ownership that's keeping me off of this game. I could very much so see Ohio State taking care of business in this one. And then if you look at scheduling as well, Ohio State, they played some tough games on their schedule. Penn State, their toughest game, Iowa, crushed them 31-0 at home. And now they're going to go on the road. Their toughest road game before this was at Illinois, and that one was pretty easy win. Still won by 17 points there. Meanwhile, Ohio State starting to get some tougher competition in. We see them with Maryland, with Notre Dame. So a little bit tougher competition here for Ohio State, especially considering that Notre Dame game was on the road. Under. If I were to bet this game, could only look at the under in this matchup. For the last 5 meetings, go under. Ohio State's last 3 all went under, but Penn State's last 2 did go over. However, Penn State's game is going over not because they're giving up points, just because they're putting up that much. Their defense forcing turnovers, their defense creating good opportunities, great field position, dominating time possession. They're running up their score. Their last game against UMass, they win that thing 63-0, covered the over literally single-handedly. So, yes, Penn State's playing over football, but the matchup's a bit more under trending. And this is a really, really, really low total for what this matchup is. Let me get the numbers pulled up here. Typically, this matchup, like I said, for the last 5 meetings going under, one of those a push. I'm going to give that a lean to the under a little bit. But just big numbers on some of these totals with those trends. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind here. 60.5, 60.5, 63, 58, 69.5. That was all the last 5 totals. The last 5 totals in this matchup, the lowest, we're looking at 58. And now we come into this meeting. This one opens up 48.5 down to 46.5. Very, very low number in this matchup for a good reason. I think we're getting a low-scoring game. We've seen this with Ohio State the last couple of seasons. Whenever they play these good teams, the good defenses like Notre Dame, it ends up being low-scoring football. What do we see in that game? 31 points. So I really do think it's going to be a similar matchup to that. I think points are going to be hard to come by. I think Ohio State brings a lesser offense than usual matchups, but a much better defense. And I think Penn State brings a much better offense than we've seen. So I don't expect either team to run away with this. Will be a lean here to Penn State, heavier lean to the under in this matchup if I were to bet this game. But obviously that is the game of the weekend. Thought we should get over that one a little bit. Let's talk about some of these other good games coming up. You guys know I like some good Pac-12 football. USC and the Utah Utes going at it. USC coming off a rough game there against Notre Dame. Caleb Williams, 3 INTs. People start freaking out a little bit. Credit to us. That was one of our winners we had this past weekend. So hopefully we can continue the good reads on this matchup. Now, opening line was definitely a lean to USC. Opened 4.5, went up 5.5. Kept climbing. Up to 7 now. I really can't lay USC -7 in this one. We talked about it last week in this matchup as to why we like Notre Dame. One, you had revenge factor from last year, but you had USC looking to this matchup, which is Pac-12 championship revenge. Utes, 2-time Pac-12 reigning champs. So spot-wise, the spot is all lined up there for USC. Utah, much worse team on the road. Here's the problem. USC, when they face a good defense, it is very problematic. Now, I'm not talking about it's going to be Caleb Williams 3 interceptions like we saw last week problematic, but it's the same reason they haven't won the Pac-12 championship in how long? It's the same reason they lost last year to Utah in the Pac-12 championship. This Utah defense is the best defense in the Pac-12. You guys have heard me say it all season long. So, yes, it's a revenge spot. Yes, it's a bounce-back opportunity here for Caleb Williams and the Trojans. And Utah, much worse on the road. So, a lot spot-wise. I couldn't argue more. Spot-wise, this is USC. Only problem is, can they get it done against a good defense? I haven't seen it. Utah's had trouble scoring the ball. But USC's defense is horrible. So is that going to help out here? Is the bad defense of USC going to let a bad offense of Utah to get some points on the board? And usually coming out of these bye weeks, we saw Utah look pretty good. Still no results there. Cam Rising still not expected to be back. If we had Cam Rising in this game, I wouldn't care about the revenge factor. I would come back with the Utes in this one. Without him, though, can't get it done there. Would be a lean to the under in this one, first and foremost, just because that Utah defense, I expect them to control time of possession, slow out the clock, slow things down. But secondly, the slightest of leans to USC. I don't love it. I really don't. It's just such a big spot. All the spots shine there to USC. Coming off some tough games and close, was it triple overtime loss to Arizona and then a loss to Notre Dame? Triple overtime win over Arizona and then loss to Notre Dame. I like what we've seen from this Utah defense. When you have a matchup that's great defense versus great offense versus bad defense, I'm usually going to take that great defense versus a great offense. Defense wins championships. Happened last year in the Pac-12 championship. Just too big of a spot play here for USC. So staying away from this one. But again, I expect this to be a bit more low scoring. It would be a lean here to USC just off the spot alone. Let's keep it in the rivalry talks. Michigan State. Michigan hasn't played nobody, and that continues on in this matchup against Michigan State. Lined open closer to 19.5, all the way up to 24.5 for good reason. I mean, Michigan is just taking care of business. Now, it's weird read with schools like this. In this rivalry game, to get over 3 touchdowns is ridiculous. So with that alone, could not want Michigan in this matchup. Now, that's where the numbers move. That's where the sharp actions come. I need to see how far they take this line. If they take it, if they can get this thing up to 25, 26, I'll be maybe a bit more interested in MSU. Really tough, though. This Michigan team, like I said, people want to hate on them for the bad schedule. I hate on them for the bad schedule. But at the end of the day, they're taking care of business as much as you can against the schedule they've been given. I mean, look at some of these wins recently. Indiana, 52-7. Minnesota, 52-10. Nebraska, 45-7. I mean, absolute blowout. So to say we're not going to get another blowout here just because it's a rivalry game, I don't know if I can sell myself on that. I would expect this to be a bit more competitive. Rivalry games, anything can happen. But just Michigan, lev bulls ahead of Michigan State. Everyone knows it. And like I said, the rivalry factor could only look at the dog in this matchup. I don't have the balls to bet a team who has simply taken care of business against all the bad teams on their schedule. I will say with Michigan, though, schedule-wise looking forward, that's where things are going to get a little bit tough coming up. They're going to have a couple of tough games to wrap up the season. But after this, they get a nice little bye. Then they get Purdue. Then they have to worry about Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State. And that's where their schedule gets tough. So because this is before a bye, no real look ahead here at all. Would be slightest of leans to Michigan State. But again, a game I'm not going to be getting involved in. Let's go ahead and talk about a Pac-12 bet I do like. John gave this out on one of the podcasts earlier this week. I think give it on the Instagram Live as well. We both lined up on this game. You have Arizona State at Washington. These Arizona schools in the Pac-12 have been covering decently. Now, ASU 1-5 straight up, 2-3-1 against the spread. They do come out of a bye week. Prior to that, they had the loss to Colorado, lose that one by a field goal, 27-24. We're on the under there, got that. And then you look here at this Washington Huskies team. What do? 6-0 straight up, 3-2-1 against the spread. They squeak out a win against Oregon last week, which really, if everyone knows, they should have lost that game. What did Oregon go? 0-for-3 on fourth downs. Multiple opportunities to have field goals in those. One, they should have punted, and they missed a field goal. You lose the game by a field goal. 3 opportunities to put one in through the uprights. Just horrible game there, horrible game management. You guys have heard people ranting about that all week with Lanning. This game, though, come back around. Arizona State, a little bit of success in this matchup, a lot of success in this matchup. 17-3-2 against the spread the last 22. Now, granted, that goes way back. They've only met a couple of times the last couple of years. But with only meeting a couple of times the last couple of years, Arizona State has won the last 2 meetings, including a 45-38 win at home last year. Now, their offense is not as good as what they were last year, but defensively they are. And we've seen Washington struggle against some of these better Pac-12 defenses. We saw Washington struggle against Arizona. So definitely a letdown spot here for Washington. I expect them to win this game. Covering 4 touchdowns, though, ridiculous. And obviously this number's already come back down to life a little bit, 26.5. ASU, man, I mean, they had some quarterback injuries early. Bourget comes back. He's been a bit better. So when they had their quarterback injuries leaning heavily on that defense, that sharpened up their defense a little bit. You get a quarterback back, you can be able to play both sides of the football a bit better. They've been looking a bit better the last couple of weeks. They looked okay against Colorado. Now, I don't think that means much. I don't think Colorado is all that special, but nonetheless, this is a letdown spot for Washington, a matchup Arizona State has owned, and you're getting now just under 4 touchdowns because that number's come down a little bit, but you're getting a shitload of points in the matchup. This is ASU all the way. If you get blown out by 30, so be it. You get blown out by 30. Spot-wise, trend-wise, everything matches up there for Arizona State up against the Washington Huskies. Let's get into the free bet. Let's get into some SEC action. Now, this is 5-unit bet from last week. We had Tennessee Vols. Now we're looking at this same game at Tennessee, now going on a trip to Tuscaloosa, taking on Alabama Crimson Tide. What's the common theme, guys? We have talked about these revenge factors all year long in the SEC. We talked about it with Florida. We talked about it with Tennessee last week against South Carolina. Hell, we talked about, Tennessee last week against A&M. Talked about the week prior with Tennessee versus South Carolina. Now Tennessee versus Alabama. Let's take a trip back to last season. Absolute shootout that happened in Knoxville. Tennessee pulled out the win, 52-49. What happened in the 15 prior years before last year's meeting in 2022? Alabama won 15 straight against Tennessee. 15 straight. They won the 6 prior to last season by an average of 32.5 points. Absolute blowout city. 30, 40-point wins left and right. Tennessee hasn't won in Tuscaloosa since 2003. I mean, what are we looking at here? Yes, I do not want to lay a big favorite with Alabama. I do not like laying Alabama over a touchdown favorite, but I'm doing it in this spot because I make this game damn near 13 points. This number is well short to me, and I think it's a couple of reasons why. One, the whole narrative around Alabama right now after their loss to Texas, obviously they're being undersold a little bit. 2, you have a lot of people with just short-term memory, and people love to look at that game last year with Tennessee and Alabama. Granted, it was Hendon Hooker, Bryce Young, different quarterbacks, everything else. But people love to look at that and like, oh, Tennessee beat them last year. Now you're getting 8.5 points. You look at the public action on this game, it's pretty split. It's not like the whole world's jumping on Alabama here as a favorite. I don't like laying Crimson Tide over a touchdown favorite. It feels square doing it, but man, my number is way off on this game. I make it much higher. The revenge angle after losing last year. And let's talk about this Tennessee team. The Tennessee injuries. In that game that we were on against South Carolina, McCoy gets hurt. They don't have him last week against A&M. Their offense didn't look too special. Yes, they pull out the win, 20-13. Yes, they had some red zone turnovers. They could have won that game by more. But they were held to 100 passing yards. 100 passing yards. And I get it. They're a run-heavy football team. Their defense is better than we've seen in previous years. But Bishop's hurt as well. You have this Alabama team with Milroe, who's slowly but surely figuring it out. I mean, last week against Arkansas, squeaky, tight, disgusting win, 24-21, something they should have blown out, but a win nonetheless. Milroe threw for 238, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Milton's thrown for 3 picks in his last 2 games. Home games. You guys heard me say this last week with Tennessee. They are much better at home. But what does that mean? That means they are much worse on the road. Haven't won in Tuscaloosa since 2003. Revenge factor here for the Crimson Tide. Give me Alabama -8 this weekend. That's my free bet for you guys. Really feeling confident about this one. We've been doing good on these free bets, 6-2 on the season. Last week's free bet happened to be a 5-unit play. This one, I'm just 3 units on Alabama this weekend. We'll see if we can keep on keeping on here and getting it done. That's the free bet. Let's talk about a couple more games on Saturday. Let me take a look here at some that we can go over real quick. Just a massive card coming up this weekend. Big rivalry games. I mean, we touched on it already with Michigan State, USC, Utah, big revenge factor there. Duke versus Florida State, big spread in this one. If Duke had their quarterback, would be a bit more enticed to get involved in this one. They still got it done against NC State last week, but Leonard still banged up. And we saw with Bellin last week, he was okay, threw for 107 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. The thing is, Leonard leads the team in rushing, so really tough to get on that. 2 different play styles here. Florida State, you guys heard me say it since week 1, really, really high on their offense. Top 5 offense, I think, in college football. Defensively, some questions, some problems. But when you're going up against a rival with a backup quarterback, makes it a big difference. Either way, 2 touchdowns in this one. I think Duke's defense can keep them in it, would beat the under or nothing. And secondly, would be Duke plus the 14.5 or nothing in that matchup. Some other rivalry games going on, revenge games we can talk about. TCU, Kansas State. I mean, definitely a revenge factor from last season. Kansas State gets it done, and the TCU beats them in the regular season. Kansas State gets it done in the Big 12 championship, hands TCU their first loss of the year. Definitely a little bit of a revenge factor here for TCU. However, Kansas State, one of those teams much better at home, coming off 2 tough road games. They get killed at Oklahoma State. They come back. They beat Texas Tech on the road. And this TCU team, they crush BYU, getting it done at home. Prior to that, a couple of losses, West Virginia, Iowa State. Did they flip it around? Did they flip that switch? Just because of the revenge factor alone, slight lean here to TCU. Perfect example of a game I want to get live in, though. I hope Kansas State comes out hot. I'm hoping I can get TCU plus 10.5 or better. I think they'll make this game tighter down the stretch, but I can't get on it pregame, especially just under a touchdown, 6.5. Lean to TCU with the revenge factor, but can't get on it. Guys, I have numerous bets on this Saturday card. John has 3 bets on this Saturday card. Just gave you guys one of them for free. Alabama -8 versus Tennessee for 3 units. 6-2 on these Friday free bets. Shorter episodes this week, but good news. NBA action starts next Tuesday. Me and John will be breaking down all those games. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe below. Let's make some damn money.